Hello and welcome to another episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. I am Jackie Tomes, and on this show we are having open, totally honest conversations about building a property business that creates not just cash flow but also freedom. From those that have been there, done it and bought the t-shirt, from starting up to over £17 million of deals done, over £7 million of finance raised, and we're talking about the highs and the lows, and of course the lessons along the way in, for us, creating the holiday every 6 weeks lifestyle. So we cover everything from big picture strategy, maximising your potential, and right down to practical solutions. And today I am super excited by our special guest, Julie Talbot, and we are of the same path, us and Julie. She is travelling the world whilst doing property deals in the UK and raising a family at the same time. So it's fantastic to have Julie on the show. She's going to be sharing her insights for how she's made this a reality for herself and how you do it with little ones at the same time, which is something that Dave and I cannot give the wisdom on. So an amazing conversation to come. Dom and Julie, let's do this.
Welcome, listeners. Today we have a very special guest, Julie Talbot, who's zooming in all the way from Thailand. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Hey, Dom. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Very excited to be speaking to you because, unlike Jackie, I know very little about you, so I'm going to be very inquisitive and find out everything about how you managed to create the life that you're living now. Previously, we've had podcasts on van life, you know, that sort of Jackie and Dave in their motorhome, or moho as they call it. I think it's actually been called Bert is the name of their van. And then also we've had a boat life where they've been talking about living on a boat whilst investing in property in the UK. But you're different in quite a number of ways. So why don't you tell us a bit about you, when you got started and where you're at now, just to kind of get an overview for the audience of the people so that they get to know you a bit.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So yeah, really, really excited to speaking to you. I was saying, I listen to your podcast a lot, and I'm so used to hearing your voice and not seeing your face, so it's really lovely to see you. So yes, I've been a landlord since 2009, and we actually kind of like left the UK in 2009 as well. We moved overseas with my husband's expat work. So we've kind of always grown the property portfolio whilst really mostly being outside of the UK. So we were expats for 12 years, or lived outside the UK for 12 years. And then in the last 3 years, we've been a travelling family. So travelling full time, we sort of set off to go where the wind takes us was really the remit. And carry on growing the property portfolio and world school the kids along the way.
Yeah, I mean, so the big thing I think for the listeners is for people who have kids or intending to have kids, but maybe want to travel as well. How old are your kids, and how do you homeschool them? That's kind of the question that springs to mind as a parent. It's like, how do you do it? It's just so hard to do it without a permanent base. Well, that's what you think.
Yeah, and it's sort of strange because I mean, I spoke to Jackie first back in 2018. She really helped me with some of my strategy and some thought insight and things like that. So back when I spoke to Jackie, I think the girls were like 3 or 4 or something like that back in 2018, and then now we're 11. So a lot of time has passed. So yeah, they're twins and they are 11 at the moment. And I say homeschool. I think homeschool gives the perception that you sit down for 6 hours a day and you diligently do lessons and follow a curriculum. We do not do that. It's more unschool, really. World schooling in like the widest sense, like learning from just being in the world.
From doing it, from being it, from walking the streets and exchanging money with vendors and learning kind of what real life is like in a way. You know, my son comes home from school talking about, geography, which I love, but it's like he's never going to use it in everyday life. Whereas the lessons that your twins are getting must be, really very useful. So much more worldly than most of our kids living in the UK, I imagine.
Yeah, and we involve them in the property business as well. They've got the time and space to be involved in the business, and really it sounds scary as I say it. I can't believe, and we've evolved into this as we've been traveling, because it's been 2.5 years since we've been traveling. When we were in Abu Dhabi as expats, they were in school, right? They were in a British school. They were following a curriculum. So it's the last 2.5 years that they've been, this other model, and it's evolved. And now we're at a stage where they kind of follow their passions, really, things, and learn about things that they're interested in. Whether that, I think one of them is writing a book at the moment. One of them loves researching countries, and one of them's taken on a few little projects in the property business for me.
Ooh,
So yeah,
gosh, age
it's
11. That's incredible. Okay, so you became expats in 2009. You were working abroad with your husband. Then you had the kids in what was it? So what, 2014 thereabouts?
2013. Yeah.
2013. That's right. And now it's been two and a half, 3 years that you've been. What would you call it? Digital nomads or something else? What would you call the term for?
It's a good question. Is it nomading it? I was like, because van life sounds just so simple, and boat life, that's just boat life. What are we doing? I don't know. Nomading it is probably probably the simplest way to put it. From expatting it to nomading it.
Okay, so at what point then did you go from being an expat to doing permanent traveling effectively? And yeah, what was there a particular threshold, number of properties, or maybe income that you decided, okay, now's the time to go? Because of course obviously there's a cost to travel, but some countries like Thailand is definitely cheaper to live in than say the UK. But yeah, how did you make that decision to go, okay, we're going to go now?
It's a really good question. COVID delayed us, basically. We would have left a lot sooner if it wasn't for COVID.
Okay.
But when that kind of happened, whilst we could have set off traveling through COVID, it was just, we felt it would, just to stay where we were for a while was quite sensible.
Yeah.
And then it was just a case of, lots of countries' borders closed, and you couldn't get visas and things like that. So it really became a point of, when is it a sensible time to jump, linking it in with the school year.
Right.
We were going to set off in the September 2020, October 2021, but we just, for a few practical reasons, stayed until January 2022, and then left then. So they did one term in that school year.
Right. Okay. So that's when you left. And but was there a sort of a tipping point financially that enabled you to go, you know what, I think we've got enough now? Or maybe you got your business to a certain place in terms of automation that allowed you to do it. Well, yeah, just wondering.
I mean, in terms of the property business, it sounds like a strange thing to say, but I really run it, do everything the same way now as nomads that we did as expats.
Right.
If you're growing a portfolio out of the UK or doing property outside of the UK, whether you're an expat and a nomad, you're still out of the country.
Yes.
And you can't be not you can't be, but I didn't want to be jumping on a plane to fly back for anything. I was a stay-at-home mum.
Yeah.
The Middle East was like 7 hours away on a plane. It was just, my husband traveled a lot with work with me in Abu Dhabi. So it was just, the time was just right. And strangely, living like a traveling life and a nomading life, it sounds strange, but it's actually a lower cost base than a life being based in one place, because your overheads are so much lower.
Right.
Practically, there's no gas bills, electricity bills, there's no car insurance, there's no car to fix, there's no, just a lot of there's no gym membership.
Yeah.
And if you're a tourist, then if you're living as a tourist, then things are more expensive. But if you're living as a nomad and traveling the way that we do, then it's crazy. But your cost base is so much lower. And we've met some amazing families whilst we've been on our travels. Single mums who practically say that they live this life, a traveling life with their children, because if they were in the UK or America or their home country, they wouldn't be able to afford to work or do things with the children. But living as a nomad, they can be at the beach every day, because they can be at the beach, they can do a part-time job in the evening or something like that. So they intentionally choose to live in a nomadic type of way, because it allows them to give their kids more experiences and spend less than they would if they were in the home country.
Gosh, my mind is buzzing with so many questions, as I'm sure for the listeners too. So I guess, with a van, you've got a base effectively. You've got somewhere to keep all your possessions. You've got, electricity when you want it and things like that. What was the sort of minimum requirements that you have in terms of, luggage, laptop, sort of, I don't know, money, access to money, all those. What is it that people need to put in place in order to, maybe do what you're doing and kind of live a nomadic lifestyle?
So some sort of baggage, first of all, to carry all your stuff in. We opted for rucksacks because we knew we wanted to be doing some overland travel, some train travel, some, like we want to have the flexibility to be able to just jump on and off different things as and when we wanted to. And there's nothing that makes you focus more on having less stuff than having to carry your own stuff with you. So, a bag, a rucksack, or some people have suitcases. We just find those quite difficult to fit in cars. We have rucksacks. And then it's a flight, really. It's booking the flight. It sounds really flippant to say, but I was listening to Tom Foxley. He's like a freedom kind of guy from the Freedom Project, and he sort of said the same thing. It's like, book the flight, and then once you've got the flight, it's a forcing function, because then there's other things then that you've got to do, because there's something in us. Once you've booked the flight, you're not going to not turn up to the airport for the flight. So they're the two main things that you need. And once the flight's booked, then it forces you to do everything else. Clear your house, send it all to recycle, put it into storage, like whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. And do you, so that, I mean, the appeal for a lot of people about traveling is like, that sense of freedom. I guess that obviously there's sort of downsides, not that I want to focus on it too much, but there are downsides to it too. What's the biggest thing you'd say you miss that maybe people haven't thought about sort of being permanent travelers?
It's a good one. I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, as in I always look for the best in a situation and wherever we are and focus on that. I was talking to somebody about this morning, and I think that people who set off to travel 20, 30, or even become expats 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? When you had to queue up for a phone to wait 10 minutes, to wait ages to make a phone call that lasted 2 minutes. It was all cracky. Like moving overseas, traveling, becoming an expat in that world was so different. Whereas now we might not see, some of our, some friends and family. Some people do come to visit us, some can't. But you've got Zoom. We can walk around and show people exactly where we are. So you're not face to face with people, but you can still maintain those
good
relationships in a way that really not very long ago you would be missing out on those.
Yes. Okay. And is there a minimum standard that you have for like, accommodation? Because I've been to Thailand too, and I've stayed with some, whatever it was, 30 baht a night. I mean, that was 20 years ago. Or there's obviously anything above that. So there's the kind of the basic with the cockroaches and everything else, and then there's sort of everything in between that and the luxury. Do you have a certain standard that you're looking for? Maybe you don't stay in B&Bs, maybe it's sort of Airbnbs. I know what's your, where do you stay basically?
Where do we stay? Okay, so we have sort of like a rough accommodation budget that we always aim to stick to.
Okay.
Sometimes we know we're going to go. We know that that in certain places you can't make accommodation work for that. So then in some places we know that we'll go under budget. So in other places we know we can go over budget.
Right.
So we tend to like, in terms of hacks for getting accommodation, we like Airbnb, and we tend to stay in places for a month, because then you get a pretty good discount on Airbnb.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a few sort of models of traveling, right? Because there's sort of like the, passing through things day by day and like really being totally nomadic and just like that whole. And then there's some people will base themselves in a place for say 6 months or a year, and then like do little trips out from that. What we tend to do is we tend to like spend in a month or so in a place, and then we move on. So you tend to get a really good 28-day discount on an Airbnb place. If we're doing like a couple of nights, if we are doing a flurry of travel to get somewhere, then maybe we'd be more in like, a hotel or something then. Sometimes, just for a laugh, we've gone to a really, really low budget place just to see what it's like, because if you're getting somewhere at 10 o'clock at night and leaving at 7 a.m, then
there's no
what's
point
the point?
Spending.
There's no point. And then sometimes we do house sitting as well. So then we don't have any accommodation costs. So last year, I think 4 out of 12 months we were house sitting. So that meant that, for a third of the year, we didn't have accommodation costs.
That's such a great idea. I love the house sitting stuff. So which are the best countries, or which countries do you find yourself coming back to again and again? Because certain countries are easier to travel in than others, and more friendly in terms of tourism and people staying a bit longer, whereas other countries a bit more strict. Tell us about sort of where you've been and how long you've stayed in each, or the longest and shortest maybe.
Gosh, where I've been. So I might get this wrong. It all becomes about the visas, because in Europe it's great. You've not really got too many visas to handle, but everywhere here, in Asia, we've just not found a reason to leave Asia. Right? The plan wasn't just to stay in Asia. We just haven't found a reason to leave yet. So it all becomes about the visas. So in terms of route that we took, we went from Abu Dhabi to Sri Lanka to Indonesia to Thailand. Then I think we went to Vietnam to Thailand to South Korea to Japan.
Wow.
Now I'm going to get a bit blurry, to Singapore to Thailand to Vietnam to Japan and back to Thailand. Some countries have got really like longer visas, like 3-month visas.
Okay.
Some countries have got a month, and you can extend in country.
Yes.
Quite in a quite a straightforward way. So the main reason why we've stayed in Asia, just to explain why there hasn't become a reason to leave, is the time difference. So the time difference is between 6 to 9 hours, depending on where. So Thailand, 6 hours.
Okay.
Japan is 9 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like having 2 days in one. Like we've got the Asian day, where it's just family and kids and exploring and adventures and things. And then when it hits 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's or 3 o'clock, that's UK start of business, 9 o'clock. Well, then, when the kids are in bed, I can then be doing calls and things like that. So It's like having 2 days in one. If we were to come closer to Europe, or even into Europe, then you'd have the morning or a part of the morning, and then there wouldn't be the same number of hours. So given the way that we live and school the kids, it gives us it's like having 2 days in one.
Right. Wow. Gosh, yeah. Does that mean you're more exhausted because you're kind of up for longer and having to sort of be awake for both days?
It's just, I saw this comment the other day, and I'm going to get this wrong, but just what you said just made me think of it. Something like, I am going to get it wrong. Something like, you can't have more days in life. Like, you're going to die when you die, but you can put more life into your days.
Yes.
So it's just making the most out of our days, in the evening when it's dark and the kids are in bed, like make the phone calls then rather than in the daytime when we're awake, and we can be spontaneously, I don't know, going to the cinema or going to the beach or whatever we used to do that day.
Yeah. Do you make an effort to learn the language of the country you're in? Is language something that's coming to you more naturally these days?
Sometimes you sort of aim to pick up keywords and key phrases in each places. In some places, the kids really do intentionally go and start to learn the language, like Japan and South Korea. They were sort of like picking up things there. Google Translate is just amazing, and it makes you incredibly lazy. Incredibly lazy. So efficient. Yeah. So I would love to say, yes, I'm being a linguist and I've got all these language skills. I can say hello, goodbye in a few different languages. But sometimes the kids do things. At the moment, they're learning Italian and relishing the fact that the letters are all the same to what they used to, because with Japan and South Korean, it's all just like totally different script.
Right.
So they're like, wow, Italian's so easy. because they learn Arabic as well, and Arabic was a different script. So
Wow, gosh, that's just another level of schooling, school of life, school of travel, international. Goodness gracious, just amazing. I mean, this is amazing, Julie, honestly. So what would you say is a typical week for you, and then also for the kids? Because I guess there's some level of property management that you've got to sort of keep an eye on with your properties. But what does a typical week look like when it comes to what you're up to?
Yeah, and we've always got refurbs on the go as well. We've always got new projects on the go, or projects that we're handing over. It's kind of like a bit of a conveyor belt. Yes, there's the management, but we've got investor management to do because we're with investors and clients as well as the projects we've got going on. So a typical week, I try and do like Tuesdays, for example. I try and like time box. So Mondays I try and keep as a light day, or maybe not too much work. Tuesdays always tends to be if I've got like clients or like people who I'm sort of doing a bit of coaching or mentoring with, and that tends to always fall in a Tuesdays for strategy sessions. Right. Yeah. I've kind of like got task list of like certain things that need to get done on certain days, like project updates and on certain days. Following up gets done every day because you always need to keep certain things, being followed up, but that will get done in the evening.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like the property business sort of day. I try and time block, I suppose, to know when I have a little bit of time to be working each day. And then for the life side of it does vary, but the principle is if we've got some structured learning to do, then we do that in the morning.
Okay.
So we follow a maths curriculum, but we don't follow curriculums and other things, but the girls have learning projects that they're doing. So we try and do those in the morning, and then the afternoons, they'd be freer to exercise or go out and explore or do something like that. It's quite driven by where we are as well, really, because sometimes we're in places where there's a lot of community, or sometimes, like at the moment, we're in a place where there's this really awesome. I haven't really come across anything like this anywhere else where we've been. It's kind of like a science centre that's really flexible that you can book in for a few days a week if you want to, or go full time. So the girls tend to go there 2 days a week, and they do everything from making videos to exercising. So because those days are exhausting, then the rest of the time when we're here tends to be a little bit lighter.
Gosh,
so,
and is it easy to get them
fluid.
into things like that? Even though it's in Thailand, they're happy for nomads to come along to those sorts of things. They haven't got any sort of restrictions.
That's a specific thing. But this is why it's so unique. This is a specific thing for world schoolers, kind of like passing through. Yeah. So it's really we sort of take advantage of it when we're here. And you asked about the other certain places that we come back to, and there are a few places that we go back to, either because there's a community there that we know, or because it's sort of like a place where a lot of travelling families sort of pass through. So we know there are going to be people there who we know. So we sort of like go back to those places just because community is so important, isn't it?
Especially raising kids.
Connection.
Definitely. Okay. And so work-wise then, with property, so you're continuing to grow your property portfolio and you're using investors' money to do so. So tell us a bit about that. Is there a particular model that you focused on, a particular location? And I guess it would be lovely to know how you got it to where it is now. Was it you, the driving force, or was your husband, or was it kind of both of you?
Yeah, so when it was... Probably he's always been really supportive, but he always, up until we started traveling, had a job. So, when he'd come home in the evening, the last thing he'd wanted to do was like talk about property. So it was when he was working, it was always more of my sort of, project. And growing the portfolio in Abu Dhabi, it sounds weird, but it really became like the perfect job for me as an expat stay-at-home mum, because I could choose my own hours. It was flexible. If the kids got sent home from school because it was raining, which happens in the desert, when it rains, it's like a big deal and school ends. And then if so when you growing up, doing the property thing meant I could just pick them up and it wasn't a big deal. We didn't need childcare and stuff. Since we've been traveling, he has become more involved in different things. So in terms of what type of properties we do, we tend to do more social and supported housing, so contribute, creating homes and really bought into ending homelessness, really, where we can in our own small way. We're both from Greater Manchester, and I decided a long time ago that first, Greater Manchester's huge. It's like 10 local authorities. So, in terms of thinking, where do you want to focus? Greater Manchester's the size of Singapore. So we sort of focus on Greater Manchester as our kind of like geography, and just kind of like pivot around there to find, depending on the strategy. But we mostly social and supported. We do a variety of single lets, HMOs. We did an SA, didn't really fit, for me. We focus on single lets, HMOs and studios.
Right. Okay. In the Greater Manchester area. Great. Fantastic. And where do you find your investors?
You know what? All sorts of places. There's no one place where you go to find investors. I think if you are, I tend to find investors find you. Really.
That is very true, isn't it? Especially, I guess, if you're on social media and obviously networking and meeting people. Do you have any investors in Asia, or are they all UK based? Would you say?
say global, really. Yeah, I'd say in different places. Like I say, people tend to get in touch with us because some people like what we're doing in terms of the, I suppose, social impact, I suppose, because there's normally some element of homelessness that we're helping with, but then it gives them a viable return as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. Wait, what's the I mean, because it sounds like such an amazing life, sort of new places every month, incredible life experience for the kids, and I imagine that they're kind of relatively fearless compared to some of the kids in the UK who haven't experienced nearly so much. What would you say the sort of the downsides, if any, that maybe? I don't know, is there anything that you feel your kids are missing, lacking, or that they haven't got? I just want to try and balance the perspective because it seems so amazing, but I'm sure there's something that people would go, actually, I wouldn't do it because of this.
Yeah, I think some people love the nomad life and actually really want to do it and think they can't, and for some people it's their idea of hell, and they just don't want to do it, and it's sort of why I, just talk about that, time freedom and location freedom. You can choose to have it first before you've achieved whatever your financial target is, if you want to.
Right.
So in terms of other kids missing out, I'm sure there are downsides. Like I say, I'm a Pollyanna, and the kids are happy. They wake up in the morning and they're happy, and they. We try and encourage them to have goals and share things they want to do, and as our job as parents is to make them happy. We're not putting them through the school system, which on the one hand is great, but on the other hand, it's like, gosh, is that gonna impact them in the future? I mean, who knows? I think as parents, you just try and do the right thing and make sure your kids are happy.
Yes.
And
yeah, I think that's ultimately all parents really want. That they want the best for their kids, and we do as well as we can based on our level of awareness. As you say, as long as they're effectively happy and kind of being challenged and learning new things along the way, then actually, hopefully, by if they are traveling like you guys are, then they're learning to solve problems each day, and it's not just kind of learning by rote like I think some of the education system still is here. It's kind of learning through life experience, knowing that not everything goes perfectly. Sometimes the train doesn't run on time, or you miss something, or you've lost something. Actually, how do you then figure out and work it out and sort it out? And those skills actually are real life skills, because in life there's always problems. And so if you can know how to, keep a level head in crisis or when things don't go right, and be able to solve those problems, then you're probably going to be far better equipped than a lot of people who almost kind of in a way have things handed to them and the problem solved for them in their upbringing. So yeah, I imagine it's amazing. So would you recommend more people to do this sort of travel? I guess, as you say, it's not for everyone, but would you want it for more people?
I think if you want to do it, like some like I always wanted to live like this and kind of like didn't think it was possible. And then you move outside. We moved outside the UK with like an expat job and thought that was that was some sort of freedom, and actually it was, because you can explore different places as an expat because you're closer to different places. So different places become a weekend destination, right? So for example, from Abu Dhabi, you can just nip to India for the weekend because it's only a few hours, in the same way that from the UK you could just nip to Spain for the weekend, or you can nip to Nepal or something like that. So all these places which are quite inaccessible from the UK become quite accessible. So in terms of being a nomad, would I say that more people should do it? I feel that it's more a case of, if you want to do it, you can. It's possible. Like, just because you can't see anybody doing it, if you've got that feeling inside, like that you feel like you want to live differently, more nomadically, you can. It's a case of booking the flight, get into the place, and then you do figure things out when you get there. And it sounds really, it does sound really flippant, but then the more you do it, the more you realize, gosh, it's possible. And then as you're doing it, you meet more people who are living the same way, and that then is quite freeing. So we've woken up some mornings with the accommodation ending, not knowing where we're going to go that evening.
Oh, wow.
And being like, well, should we go to Vietnam? Should we get a flight today? Or should we go to Cambodia? Or should we nip to Malaysia? And then we just booked a train and gone somewhere else. Because
Wow.
internally within Asia, for example, once you're here, the internal domestic flights are like EasyJet flights.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
it's really, and we try and travel overland most of the time because it's more fun, to be honest,
Right.
traveling slowly.
Okay, more fun. Yeah.
But sometimes for practical reasons, we will take a flight somewhere.
Yeah. So what would you say that you've learned that would be sort of kind of, I don't know, 3 useful tips for someone who, as a result of this conversation, or they've been following you for a while or something, but they're inspired and they're like, oh my goodness, I never thought this was possible. I never knew how many people out there are actually permanent travelers or nomads, and that's the lifestyle that I want to go for. So what would be sort of what are the, I don't know, three key things that they really should be aware of and get right first?
So first of all, believe this, okay? Distance is the superpower. Like so many people, I hear so many people say, oh, but you're far away and that must cause a problem and it's difficult because of miles, because of distance. And I'm like, no, like the distance, the thousands of miles becomes your superpower because it forces you to find other ways of doing things that don't require you to do them because you're not on the ground, right? If you're on the ground in the UK in the property business, you drive there, you go there, you drive around in the middle of the night, like. But when you're overseas, you're actually forced not to. So you've got to find another way of doing it, unless you want to jump on the plane and go back. And the further you are away, the less possible that is. So the distance actually becomes your superpower in automating and systemizing and just finding, being creative and finding the ways of doing things. And like see the distance as a superpower rather than being like a problem and a barrier and like something that you don't have to do all that whilst you're in the UK. You can do that whilst you're out of the UK. So that'd be the first one.
I love that.
The second one I would say is that if you are, it's a bit similar, I suppose. If you are thousands of miles away, then there's other things to be doing with your time. You're on a different time zone. So it does forces you to be more creative and come up with a way that might not be perfect to get something done. Yeah. But it'll work because you've got all these other things to figure out. So this will do, and then I'll figure out that, and then you can loop back to that in 6 months or a year or something when you've got the time. These are all mindset ones. It really is how you see things. And the third one I would say is there's always a way to do something. But I think part of being human is we can find excuses or reasons why not to do something. And it's kind of like having that mindset, having that belief of like finding a way. So something I like to say is rather than saying, "No, I can't do this. Oh no, it's a problem. I can't do it." I'll flip the question, and I read this in a magazine somewhere. Say, "How can I? Like, how can I, organize this?" And just say it a few times. The answer might not come to you, but think of it in that way, and then just somehow your brain figures it out. So, how can I as a tool rather than I can't do it.
I love those, Julie. Those are fantastic. And it makes me think, one of my favorite things recently is realizing that every problem really is a gift in disguise. So as you say, the distance thing, actually, let's see it. Actually, it is your superpower. As you say, you can make it the best thing about it, not the biggest barrier, but the best thing. So it's the gift. And that other one about asking questions, that absolutely resonates with me, because so often people's self-talk is, oh, I can't do that, I can't do this, and there's kind of all these limiting beliefs that we have that we've been programmed in from growing up, and parents and teachers and all sorts of things like that. Instead, turning it around, putting it as a question, as you say, because the brain loves to answer questions. So rather than affirmations of I am going to do this, you go, actually, how can I do this? Why is it I'm so good at handling this? What is it that I've got to do that's going to enable me to do this? And asking those questions, and then your brain just gets to work, and the subconscious gets to work. And sometimes you just wake up and it's like, oh, that's it. That's what I needed to do. And it pops into your mind, and it's just incredible. So I love it. Something I sort of think just on that sometimes, because it seems that you can. I really had to do a lot of conditioning to retrain myself on just how to think like this. And one kind of like analogy that I'd tell myself is, we put man on the moon.
for God's sake, we're putting a man on the moon. I've got to be able to figure this out. You know, like they did that when no one had even been to the moon before, when no one even knew how to do it. And they set the challenge of going to the moon and figured it out. So I find like telling myself that before I say my how can I gives me some perspective of like, well, at least my thing isn't as hard as their thing was.
Yes, exactly. Perspective is everything, isn't it? Because then we can see the problem from a different angle. And make us realize that actually it's not nearly as bad as or as difficult actually as we think it is, especially as they put people on the moon with less technology than we've got in our phones right now. You know, it's relatively basic compared to what we've got with you know, our technology now. So Julie, it'd be really interesting to know, what are the sort of 3 things that you can't live without, you know, that you absolutely have to have, that might be useful to know about for anyone going traveling? What would you say those things are?
That is a brilliant question. And I have to say, when we set off, we didn't know about these things. But the first thing I would say, and probably unexpected, is knives. Like, having spent quite a bit of time in Airbnbs, like often you'll get, you know, street food or food out or whatever. But when you're cooking at home, the knives are always blunt, and it's just, you know, you can nearly stab yourself if you're chopping, I don't know, potato or something with a really blunt knife, which is normally only one of. So that frustration led us to buy in some knives and a knife rack when we were in Japan. So we now travel with our own knives. So I found that was important, but obviously you've got to be careful when you're traveling with those on boats, because then they have to put them in a special store because they're lethal. Not planes though. So knives is one thing, definitely. Something else which we ended up investing in, and as I think it probably because we just stayed in a variety of accommodations, is we've got a projector, kind of like a small mobile projector, so we can make anywhere our, like, because we have a film night on Thursday night as a bit of a family tradition, then we can set up, you know, film anywhere, whether that's on like an external wall or, you know, inside, because sometimes, you know, Airbnbs maybe don't have TVs, which is fine, but film night's not quite the same when you're watching it from a device. So projector's been helpful. And then I can't decide between my next 2, so I'm going to say 4 rather than 3. The third thing that we've loved is an AirPress coffee maker, which is like tiny, just like the size of a mug. It's like plastic sort of thing, but yeah, just like a mobile coffee AirPress, so that no matter where we are or how we're moving around or when we arrive, we can always have our own coffee, like made our way. So it's like a constant, no matter where we are. And then the joint third thing would be Kindles. And this was like a bit unexpected, but we got the kids some Kindles before we set off. And I know books are wonderful, books are amazing, but the kids just like have this astonishing library that's now built up on the Kindles. And it means that they don't have to be on iPads if they want to do reading, and it means they're not carrying loads of stuff. So yeah, their reading has just like gone crazy because they've got the Kindles. So we've really found those super helpful.
Brilliant. I love that. Yeah, like you, I cannot live without my coffee. So a good coffee machine or some device is absolutely essential. And it's funny you mentioned about the knives, because yeah, I even take a knife to my in-laws' house because their knives are blunt as anything. So that makes a lot of sense. I love it, Julie. That's fantastic.
There's a knife sharpener that with it as well, right? Because you've got to be able to handle it all.
Yes. Yeah, quite. Exactly. Brilliant. And I guess one thing that you know, the people who are maybe a little bit more fearful might think is it safe? Is it safer than the UK? Is it the same? Is it, or do you have to have your wits about you because you're a foreigner?
I've always felt safe. You know, we don't. I don't want to say we don't tend to spend a lot of time in capital in the bigger cities. We do sometimes go to bigger cities, you know, Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur or Tokyo, places like that. I haven't ever felt unsafe in them, but we do tend to spend more time in second cities or in more rural types of settings as well.
Right.
I mean, some of the places that we've been to, you literally don't lock your doors, kind of thing, because they've just been so remote. So safety. I don't want to say I feel safer than I do in the UK. I think that would be an unfair thing to say. But you know, I think you've always got to be mindful of your safety wherever you are in in the world, and I've never felt unsafe. I mean, medical is another thing that people say, like, oh, what about medicines? What medicines do you take? And no matter where you are in the world, there's children and parents, and there's doctors and hospitals. And, if you ever needed something, if we've ever needed something, we've been able to get it quite easily. Actually, we have had to have trips to A&E for various different accidents, whether it's been broken elbows and there's some other situation we had to attend to. And there's, places have hospitals and places have doctors, and you can just, you don't need to carry everything but the kitchen sink, because people who live there need, all these facilities are there for the communities that are there already.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That makes sense, of course, but people live all over the world, therefore they need to have that healthcare available to them too. I guess one last technical question, kind of a bit random here, but mortgages. Like, if you're a permanent traveller, how do you get a mortgage in the UK if you're not here and you haven't got a permanent address? Or do you have a permanent address?
Yeah, so I mean, you've always got to be transparent about your setup. I've never hidden what our setup is. Right. What I would say is, like, I kind of like see it as a line, I suppose. Like, imagine if you had all the mortgage lenders in the UK like lined up, like, all the potential. When you tell them that you're an expat, so many of them like stand back and go, no, we won't touch you. And then when you say that you're a stay-at-home mum doing property, then even more of them stand back and say, we won't touch you. And then when you say you're a nomad stay-at-home mum, then even more of them stand back. So, you just got to accept that you haven't got access to the full range of mortgage lenders if you're going to choose a more unconventional life. And maybe your interest rate is therefore going to be a bit higher. But, as property investors, it's your job to make your deal stack, and to make them work. And, am I happy with the interest rates that we get, living the life that we live, doing the projects that we do? Does it stack? Well, it's your job as a property investor to make sure it does.
Yes, and I guess it's a compromise, right? So the cost of living is lower, but the interest rate effectively, is higher. So I guess it's just that trade-off, versus living in the UK, where obviously, the cost of living is sky high in comparison, maybe. So very good, excellent. Julie, is there any parting guidance or words of inspiration that you'd like to share with the listeners? Is there anything that you'd like to end this on?
Oh, I suppose it would just be the question, like, what if? If you want to be somewhere, what if you just go there, book the flight, go there and grow your portfolio from there? Like, choose the location freedom or the time freedom now and first, rather than waiting to have it until you've got the financial freedom and then go in. Like, your progress might be a bit slower. But so what? Because you're living a life that you want to live now, right, rather than putting it off until a point in the future.
Exactly. Putting it off into the future is just not worth it, is it? You either, my favorite saying at the moment, I've got a few, but this is one, is you either go after the life that you want or you settle for the life that you get. And for me, it's like, yep, I want to constantly be going after the most amazing life I can possibly live. So yeah. Thank you so much, Julie. This has been really inspiring for me, certainly, and I hope so for the listeners too.
Thank you, Dom. It's been a pleasure to join you and to listen to all the amazing different types of freedom that you guys share on the podcast. It's really inspiring.
Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. If you are not already connected with Julie, then do reach out and connect. You can find all of her contact details in the show notes, so do go out and connect. If you are new to the podcast and you enjoyed this episode, then I recommend that you check out episode 35, where we're talking about the motorhome life. So how to travel Europe in a motorhome and continue doing property deals whilst you're at it. So that's episode 35. If you enjoyed this episode, you will love that one too. So this time next week, we are back again next Friday with another episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. And you'll be joined by myself and Dom, and we're going to be talking about crafting your mission and promise using the property strategy business plan. So another great episode. So until then, have a fantastic week ahead and loads of love.